The Albanese Labor government was busy welcoming good economic news today, with the latest wage figures showing for the first time in nearly 3 years, wages growth has outstripped inflation. So we have real wages increases. Only just, though. Inflation for the year was 4.1% and wages increased by 4.2%. So that's better than going backwards, and we have a lot of ground to make up. But Jim Chalmers makes it sound like Christmas.
Real wages growth is back in our economy even sooner than we expected. This means that Australians are earning more, and because of our tax cuts, they will keep more of what they earn.
Well, it's hardly an end to the cost of living crisis, is it? And by the way, tax cuts were locked in years ago under the coalition. Labor has broken its promise and fiddled with them and made sure that middle to high income earners actually pay more. Which leads us to the elephant in the room of our economic discussion, and that is simply that we pay too much income tax in this country. The marginal rates are too high, especially at the top end. Increasingly so now that Labor has broken its election promise and opted to keep the 37 cents in the dollar tax rate for middle income earners. None other than former Prime Minister Paul Keating, Jim Chalmers' political hero, has called out the high personal income tax rates. In an interview with the Financial Review to mark his 80th birthday, Keating has declared that our top tax rate is too high at effectively 47 cents in the dollar. That's 45% tax and 2% Medicare levy. There's an issue that all societies should have of how much a person's conscientious efforts and wealth should be delivered to the state, Keating says. Once you start getting the top rate over, in my opinion, 39%, it becomes confiscatory. And when they become confiscatory, you just lose all that impetus to make a dollar and do clever things. Look, I call Keating out when I think he's wrong, but he is spot on here, and it needs to be said. In this interview, he makes a coherent argument about carbon pricing, which he says would be more efficient than our current climate and energy mess. That's an argument worth having. And he ramps up his attack on AUKUS, and that's where I think he's dangerously wrong-headed. But he also declares the NDIS is an, quote, unsustainable tearaway pressure on the budget, which is another timely warning. And on US politics, Keating again makes some straightforward common sense when he reflects on his own age and talks about Joe Biden. It's no accident that people are at their peak in their 40s, says Keating. You know, I certainly was. And he joked about how he felt like he was 40 for about 30 years. But riffing off this, he said that relative infirmity meant 81-year-old President Joe Biden ought to put his cue in the rack and not seek re-election at this year's US poll. That's, again, absolutely right, of course, and far more realistic than what we heard from the current Prime Minister today.
President Biden is doing, in my view, a great job there in the United States. He's someone who I have had the privilege of sitting around a cabinet table with him. He's someone who is very much on top of his brief.
On top of his brief, hey? To be fair, what else can Albo say about the sitting US president? Our PM has to be diplomatic. But it's on tax that the former Treasurer and Prime Minister's warning is most pertinent. Keating is Labor's greatest ever economic reformer. He understands aspiration, and he also understands this nation's economic strengths and weaknesses. And for wage earners in this country to face a personal tax rate that can effectively take away half of their income, well, that is no way to encourage aspiration and national prosperity.